Hi everyone. Welcome to the first ever Facebook Live session on the homepage of MDS Matters. We're here today to celebrate Worldwide MDS Awareness Day. I'm Chad Sayward. I'm the Director of Advocacy here at Celgene, and I'm joined by two inspirational guests. To my left, we've got Jack Becker, who is an MDS patient, and to my right, Tracey Iraca, who is the Executive Director of the MDS Foundation. So over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to go through a variety of discussions around MDS. We'll look at what is MDS, what resources are available, what diagnosis looks like, the important role of a caregiver, as well as the important role of research. So after the time that we have these discussions, we'll have an opportunity to answer some questions that you can submit during the next 30 minutes. There are some rules though with the questions. First of all, we're not permitted to answer any questions specific to an individual, so we're not allowed to provide any medical advice. So we would encourage you to talk to your healthcare provider and or reach out to the MDS Foundation. They've got great services that they can help you directly with your specific case. And then finally, we're not permitted to talk about any specific treatment questions. So please refrain from asking any specific treatment questions. All right, so let's get started. Tracey, as the Executive Director of the MDS Foundation, would you please give us some facts about MDS, maybe a summary of what the disease is?
Sure. So myelodysplastic syndromes are a diverse group of bone marrow disorders where the bone marrow doesn't produce enough healthy blood cells. It's actually also referred to as a type of blood cancer. It's overall, there are about 13,000 new cases of MDS diagnosed per year, so that translates to about 5 every 100,000 people. It's most patients are over the age of 65, but it does affect all ages, even children. And symptoms vary based on which blood cell type is involved. So some of the most common symptoms are fatigue, shortness of breath, and frequent infections. So thank you so much for having me here today. The MDS Awareness Day is an especially important milestone that we recognize each year. Our hope is that the community on this day and throughout the year learns more about the disease, and patients and caregivers share their information and their experiences to help others. If we hear more and more about MDS, it'll help increase learning, awareness, and access to resources.
Perfect, thank you. That's a great summary. What I heard that stood out is that MDS is, number one, it's syndromes, so it's not just a disease, but multiple diseases. Number two, it happens in people that are more mature, 65 and older primarily, but it can happen in the pediatrics. And third, that it's a relatively rare disease. Yeah. Good. So Jack, let's turn to you now if we can. Would you tell us a little bit about your story, your initial diagnosis, what led you to share your experience with the MDS community?
Well, thanks, Chad. First of all, I'd like to thank you for having me here. Raising MDS awareness is something I care deeply about. I'm 81 years young and a retired engineer. I'm physically quite active and believe in sharing my story to help educate others. I first received my MDS diagnosis in October of 2015. Because of my age, my doctor informed me I would not be a candidate for stem cell bone marrow transplant. And that was my initial direction, was to watch and wait for symptoms to progress.
So thank you. You mentioned MDS is important to you. I see you have a pin there.
This is my MDS awareness.
I had one. I'm glad you had one. That's great. You mentioned the symptoms. Can you talk a little bit about which symptoms you were experiencing?
Surely. There were several. I had never heard of MDS before. My nurse, I had called several times to understand what was going on. After visiting my hematologist, we felt that I was in good hands with this physician's opinion, and it was clear and still plunging me into this perplexing world of MDS. I found that people are unaware of what conditions exist. It's important to see a primary care doctor, be aware of the symptoms that you may be experiencing without knowing what they are. I didn't know what the alerts were for MDS. Had I known what to look for, I would have raised a flag much earlier.
Yeah, no, really good point, and it's an important point. With MDS, because it is syndromes, it's patient by patient is going to be unique. So there's not a cookie cutter way of taking care of MDS. So it's really important that you talk to your healthcare provider about your specific case. Tracey, let me ask, is Jack's experience pretty similar to things that you hear from other patients?
Absolutely. We hear from newly diagnosed patients at the foundation every day, and most patients and caregivers are confused when they first are trying to process the information that they're hearing from their physicians. So that's where the foundation can be the most helpful. As the patients leave the doctor, the first thing they want to do is find out more information.
Yes.
And usually they'll go to the internet and they'll do some searching, which can get really scary. So our hope is that they'll turn to organizations like the MDS Foundation and other support organizations to work as a bridge between the patients, the caregivers, the healthcare team, and the MDS community. So at the foundation, we've designated over 175 centers of excellence to ensure that patients receive the best care possible and are seen by specialists in MDS. And we've also developed a mobile application called MDS Manager to help patients to more effectively manage their care. It helps to give them confidence and empower them to have the difficult conversations with their healthcare team.
So important in a disease that is rare to have an expert in the disease. So thank you for the network of the Centers of Excellence so that patients can get to folks that treat MDS on a regular basis. In hematology in general, we earlier this year we did a program on AML. We talk a lot about the role of the caregiver and how important that role is. My dad is a caregiver of my mom, and he is an angel. The work that caregivers do it's sometimes under-recognized but so important. So I'm just hoping, Jack, would you tell us a little bit about your wife and her part in this journey?
Sure, I'd be happy to. My wife immediately took on the caregiver role and was unconditionally supportive and encouraging as I dealt with the ups and downs of this disease. Shortly after, I experienced a number of symptoms, including low platelet counts, random symptoms of anemia, minor bleeding, and lack of appetite, which still stays with me. I have to be alerted to eat. I just don't have any appetite. Finally, I was hospitalized. When I was not hospitalized, but I would have been if my platelets fell any lower than 37,000, which is a significant sign of myelodysplastic syndromes being present in the blood. After continuously monitoring my blood counts and regular visits to my hematologist, received great news that everything was looking up. I was much better, and I attribute that to my wife's care. She reminds me to eat when I don't. And also I found through the MDS Foundation, the resources were just fabulous. They're constantly there. People at the foundation are so supportive. Whether it be family or a member of the MDS Foundation or patients from a support of group or forum, it's so incredibly important to have this support as you make your journey through the MDS. You need someone to lean on during the good and bad moments, to help you understand what's going on, how to work through it.
Yeah, thank you. So it's funny as you're saying that. My wife's always reminding me to stop eating.
Yeah.
I don't have that same problem. I have the opposite problem, unfortunately. So Tracey, back to you. What are some of the common areas that it's important for patients to understand, and what resources are available for those patients?
Sure. So I think the most important thing, especially right at the beginning of diagnosis, is for people to understand that there are support groups available and live patient forum events where they can meet other patients and they can start feeling connected so that they don't feel alone. That's really, it's such a common feeling when you're first diagnosed. Most people have never heard of the disease, and then they don't know anyone else who has it. So when you're meeting other recently diagnosed patients, a lot of times you have newly diagnosed patients who have the same fears that you have, but you also meet patients who have been able to absorb the disease, and they've already developed some coping mechanisms that they can share with you and with your caregiver, and they make friendships and bonds that really help them through the whole journey.
Yeah, that peer-to-peer support education is super important.
Yes.
I appreciate that. And the MDS Foundation has got so many resources available for patients. Those live patient meetings that you're referring to are just phenomenal for getting education, having questions specific to your case answered, and then making those connections. So great. Thanks for that. Jack, earlier Tracey mentioned that when patients find out the diagnosis, a lot of times they'll go online and they'll start searching for information online. I'm curious, what prompted you to turn to the MDS Foundation?
Well, I searched all over and looking at certified websites, the American Cancer Society, various others. I found the foundation was incredibly valuable, giving me the resources to read, to understand. The language was alien to me. The terms are not something I was familiar with, but by going through the literature they had, I really got a good foundation. And then I reached out to the foundation to find out if there was a support group in New Jersey. I was directed to a group that met in Moorgate, and subsequently went to the Memorial Sloan Kettering Center in Middletown, New Jersey. The forum was an eye-opener. Really learned so much about different perspectives patients had, different issues they were dealing with, and met caregivers through that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So thank you. Tracey, can you tell us a little bit more about the foundation's mission? To serve the community and how impactful the foundation is in terms of providing resources?
Sure, absolutely. It's the foundation is part of a coalition of MDS groups around the world called the MDS Alliance. The Alliance was originally called Life Beyond Limits, with a goal of supporting the elderly who were not receiving active treatment. But since then, it's evolved into the MDS Alliance, and we serve patients of all ages across the globe by sharing research and resources for patients to learn. And our goal at the foundation and also at the Alliance is to provide clear direction to anyone worldwide who's looking for resources for MDS. And if the MDS Foundation isn't the best support, we send patients to the right organization within the Alliance, and other groups do the same, which makes this a truly global effort and a great tool for patients. So for the foundation, we find that it's helpful to understand the patient's wants and needs. They're all so different and individual, where Jack immediately wanted to meet other people and to get that type of peer-to-peer support. Some patients just want the printed materials and they want to quietly absorb what's happening. So we have our building blocks of hope, and we have other printed materials to really help patients. Some patients take to social media, which is great. They can talk and communicate with other patients, especially if they're not well enough to leave the house, and that's a way that they can still communicate with other patients. So there's social media sites as well, like the MDS Matters Facebook page, but it's so individual. The most important thing, I think, is to get to know the patient first, and Audrey does a great job of that.
Awesome. So thank you. So a couple of things I just want to elaborate on there. For the folks out there, Tracey just mentioned the building blocks of hope. And earlier we were having a conversation about the importance of caregivers. And there is education in the building blocks of hope specific for caregivers. So I would definitely I would encourage everyone out there to check out this resource. It's a really good resource, and specifically to the caregivers, so there's information for you as well. The second thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is you mentioned the Life Beyond Limits.
Yes.
And the purpose of Life Beyond Limits was ageism, you said. So for folks out there that aren't familiar with the term ageism, it's a discrimination against patients based on their age. It's a prejudgment of how a patient will do based on their age. And a lot of times we'll hear from patients that their doctor told them, well, yeah, you are tired, but you're getting older, you're slowing down. And I just want to make sure that people are checking in with that and talking to the foundation and talking to other folks, because a lot of times it could be the disease that's causing the tiredness. So you want to make sure you're getting a second opinion and hearing from folks to make sure that there's not a way to treat the tiredness, that it's not the disease, that it's not just that you're maybe more mature in age. So thank you for that. So we just came off last month, Blood Cancer Awareness Month, and unfortunately, we found during the month that a lot of people aren't super knowledgeable about Blood Cancer Awareness Month and the specific diseases. Does the foundation have resources available to help raise awareness with patients, their community, so their family members and so forth, as well as to their healthcare provider, to raise awareness around MDS?
Yes, absolutely. It's when we first hear from patients, we encourage them to order the materials for themselves, but also for their family members, and to share those materials with their community. So Jack has his button, and I have my wristband, and we have pens. We have so many different little things that you can order from the foundation, and you can spread through your community just to help spread awareness. And maintaining an active international network of patients and caregivers and healthcare professionals and industry partners is really the best way to make sure that we continue to spread MDS awareness worldwide. But spreading the materials and the education is most important.
What about, so Jack mentioned earlier that the words and the language were foreign to him. And when we, after a congress, so when the medical community gets together to discuss research, there are reports afterwards, and sometimes it's like tough to follow all of the research. The foundation has some resources for that situation as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The Building Blocks of Hope is a great resource, but within the Building Blocks of Hope, there's a glossary. We've taken that glossary out, and we've created a smaller pocket guide of MDS terms. That's a really great resource just for quick checks on words. Eventually, you will learn to understand the language your hematologist is speaking, but the glossary really does help. And we have patient summaries of scientific meetings. So we just had our international symposium in Valencia, and we have a patient summary of that event that's been really well received, and we spread that through the MDS Alliance. They've been great sharing it with all of their stakeholders as well, and it gives patients a good, clear, patient level understanding of what's happening in the research right now. We'll be doing the same thing for our ASH Symposium in December.
So what I'd like to say about that, number one, please check out that resource. It makes the research understandable. It's a really great piece so that you can understand what is going on in the research that's currently taking place. And I also want to make a plug or a plea for the people out there, for the patients out there that have MDS, to consider research, consider participating in a clinical trial. It's for us to make advances in this disease, research is going to be the way that we do it. And for the folks in the United States, and then also outside. So this, because you mentioned the alliance. So globally, it's the numbers of people that are participating in research is too low. And so I would encourage you to talk to your healthcare provider about what research opportunities, what clinical trials are available for you, and consider participating in a clinical trial.
And that's something that the foundation can help with as well. So we get a lot of phone calls, and Audrey does a great job of talking with people. I was telling Chad earlier that I was talking with a patient last week, and he was looking for some copay assistance, and I was helping him online, and he was telling me a little bit about his story, and his treatment wasn't quite working, and he was looking for clinical trials. So I quickly connected him with Audrey, and after their conversation, I asked her how he did, and she told me he was 91 years old, which completely shocked me, because I thought I was speaking to somebody who was probably 60. But he was so enthusiastic, and he's just said, this isn't working for me, but there has to be something out there that is. And it was encouraging.
So to the point, thank you for sharing that. To the point that we were just talking about with ageism, though, it's the number isn't so important. It's the individual patient. A 91-year-old that we thought was 60. So please make sure that you're taking active participation in your care. Jack, I'm curious, with the foundation and the alliance, part of their job is to make sure that patients are staying active and involved in the journey. How has the MDS Foundation helped motivate you to stay active in your journey?
Well, it truly gives the community the resources we need to become experts in our own disease, and to offer support that's truly valuable. After speaking with the MDS Foundation, I mentioned that I'd be very helpful to start a support group closer to home in northern New Jersey. I volunteered to find a location for us and facilitate the MDS group, and the foundation agreed to sponsor it. This couldn't have been possible without the amazing people at the MDS Foundation who took the time to help build the resources to support patients. It's very gratifying to know that I helped bring this type of resource to people in my community, and I encourage others to utilize your resources to do the same, whether it's speaking about their own experience with MDS or even starting a group of their own. Together we can continue to spread the MDS awareness and patient support.
That's great, Jack. Thank you for starting that. I mean, I know it's extra work, but it's super important for the folks that are attending that meeting. How frequently do you guys meet?
We meet monthly.
Good.
And it's amazing how people just come in and feel so comfortable sharing their experiences. Unfortunately, some people are still not sure what they have. Learn to speak to the doctor. That's the main thing.
Super important. So number one, thank you for taking on that initiative. And Tracey, thank you for providing the resources to folks to create these support groups. It's the work that you guys are doing is it's super valuable. So Celgene also is committed to the MDS space, obviously. But I just want to also put out, you're on the MDS Matters page. I want to make sure that you share this page with your community. So you'll find it at www.facebook.com/MDS Matters. With this page, you'll get all kinds of great information. There will be factoids about the disease. There's in the comments section of different topics, there will be really great, rich conversation that goes on. So I would encourage you to visit MDS Matters on a regular basis, and also make sure that you're sharing it with your specific personal community as well. Okay, so we have a few questions from viewers out there. And I'm going to remind you, as you're still continuing to submit questions, that we can't answer any questions that are specific to treatments, and unfortunately we're not permitted to provide any personal medical advice that you'd either have to reach out to your healthcare provider or to the foundation. So here's the first one. I have to read it. So Sue asked, what is the life expectancy of this MDS journey?
Intense. It's so specific based on the MDS patient. It's based on your subtype. It is syndromes. So it is a bunch of different disorders. So it's completely dependent on what your subtype is during diagnosis and success with treatment, your health overall. It's really difficult there is no straight answer for that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And Charlene wants to know, what is the disease genetic? It seems people in my age group have sudden onset of this disease.
Yeah, we do find that it is more sudden onset. As we talked about before, it's older patients, so it's primarily older patients. It's kind of a progression, a disease of the elderly, but there are cases of younger patients, of siblings both having MDS, that kind of speaks to the possibility of genetic conditions, but for the most part, it comes on suddenly as you're aging.
Okay. And Shirley asked, is MDS related to chronic large lymphocytic leukemia, or CLL?
Don't have a clear answer for that. I'm not sure, unfortunately, of the connection between those diseases, but we can answer that question later.
Perfect.
On the MDS Matters page.
Perfect. And okay, and then Greg asked, I've heard that there's a risk of MDS turning into another disease. Is this true?
Yes, about a
Sorry
third.
to bombard you with all the questions.
That's okay. That's why I'm here. It's no problem at all. About a third of MDS patients can evolve to become acute myeloid leukemia, which is AML for short. It's depending on the patient's subset, again, at diagnosis, is whether or not they'll actually make that transition.
Yeah, so I'll elaborate on this one just to give you a breather for a second. So in MDS, you've got immature blast cells or immature blood cells that are called blasts. And when the percentage of blasts increases, you have different stages of MDS. Once you hit the threshold of 20% blasts in your count, that's when you technically have AML. So it's a very similar progression of the disease. You could be at 19% and have MDS, and then once you hit 20%, that's when it's transformed to AML, technically. Yeah. Okay, so I don't know who this is from, but there's a question here. I live in a small town in Alabama, and we don't have any patient events available, will the MDS Foundation consider all locations to sort MDS patients like myself?
Yes, absolutely. The foundation is committed to helping patients across the map. If we don't already have a patient forum scheduled or a support group in your area, we'll work our best. We typically, when we choose regions for our patient forums, which are about 10 per year within the U.S. and then a couple outside the U.S. depending on the year, we reach out to our centers of excellence first, and what we would do is try to find the nearest center of excellence to your location, work with that doctor to see if we can schedule a patient forum. If that doesn't work out, or at least not in a timely manner, we would then work with you to create a support group like we did with Jack in North New Jersey.
Which is cool, because then you can have sort of the patient forum on a monthly basis.
Yes.
You can invite guest speakers in from your local community, key opinion leaders in MDS space, identify someone from a local center of excellence, and invite a faculty to come in to provide education directly to your support group.
We can, and Audrey's really great at helping with sending resources to the support groups and actually helping with speakers as well.
Thanks. So, in from Tracey. Tracey's got a question from Tracey. I'm newly diagnosed with MDS. Jack, what is one thing you wish you learned earlier in your journey with MDS?
Well, that the MDS Foundation was out there to provide knowledge and support that I was looking for. As I mentioned, I was not familiar with MDS before my diagnosis. Finding the resources at the MDS Glossary of Terms, and especially the Building Blocks of Hope. It's the whole compilation that you can start with and build from there. It just, from cover to cover, just read it again and again until you understand it.
Great.
Good, good. All right, well, at this point, we are running out of time. We're coming up on 30 minutes. I wanted to say a very special thank you to Jack and to Tracey for joining us today. The work that you do, sharing your perspective, is super appreciated. So we appreciate the work you do on behalf of patients in the MDS community.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Celgene, for your dedication to MDS patients and patient care. And I want to give a special thank you to my team at the MDS Foundation. I just work with the I work with the best people, and they're so hardworking and dedicated, and they make it a pleasure every single day. And don't forget to visit the MDS Foundation website and the MDS Alliance website to learn more.
Thanks, Jack.
Well, yes, thank you, and I'm happy to share the information and education, especially on MDS Awareness Day. The support from the foundation is just unbelievable.
Good. Thank you all for tuning in today. Have a great day.